The translation booth smelled like recycled air and old coffee. Elara Voss pressed her fingertips against the cold glass, separating her from the grand assembly hall, watching alien dignitaries glide across polished floors that reflected the light of 1,000 distant stars. Their robes shimmered with colors that had no names in human languages. Their voices, when they spoke, carried the weight of empires older than Earth's written history. She was invisible to them, just another human, just another translator. Elara adjusted her headset and pulled up the next document on her flickering screen. Her station was tucked in the upper gallery of the diplomatic archive on Outpost Vael'Thar 9, a sprawling structure built into the side of an asteroid at the edge of the Vael'Thar Empire. The outpost served as a way station for minor trade negotiations, immigration processing, and the occasional cultural exchange. Nothing important ever happened here. Nothing that would reach the inner worlds, the jeweled planets where the true power of the Empire resided. That was fine with Elara. She had grown up in the slums of New Boston on Earth, in the years after humanity's integration into the galactic community. Integration was a kind word for what had actually happened. Humanity had been absorbed, catalogued, and assigned a place in the Empire's vast hierarchy. Humans were considered useful for their adaptability and their strange emotional range, but they were not respected. They were laborers, technicians, translators. They were the ones who filled the gaps that more advanced species found beneath them. Elara had clawed her way out of poverty through sheer stubbornness and a gift for languages. She could speak 17 dialects fluently, including the notoriously difficult Vael'Thar High Tongue, which required 3 different vocal registers and an understanding of harmonic resonance that most humans could never master. It had taken her 6 years of study, practiced alone in her tiny apartment while her neighbors shouted through paper-thin walls, but she had done it, and it had earned her this job. This small, quiet job where she was paid just enough to send money home to her aging father. Her sister Lyssa had called that pathetic. Elara pushed the thought away and focused on the screen. The document was a trade agreement between a Therosian merchant guild and a coalition of human mining cooperatives. Dry, technical, mind-numbing. She began the translation, her fingers moving across the holographic keyboard with practiced efficiency. Halfway through the 3rd paragraph, the lights in the archive flickered. Elara looked up. The vast hall below had gone silent. Every dignitary, every attendant, every floating servitor drone had frozen in place. Then, as one, they turned toward the eastern entrance. The doors opened. They were massive, carved from a single piece of starstone that glowed faintly with its own internal light. As they swung inward, a sound filled the space. Not music, exactly. More like the hum of the universe itself, a resonance that Elara felt in her chest, in her bones, in the base of her skull. A figure stepped through. Elara's breath caught. She had seen images of the Vael'Thar before. Everyone had. They were the ruling species of the Empire, ancient beyond measure, their civilization spanning tens of thousands of years. But seeing one in person was different. The images did not capture the presence. They did not capture the way reality seemed to bend slightly around them, as if they existed in a space just adjacent to normal matter. The Vael'Thar who entered was tall, easily 8 feet, his body long and elegant. His skin was silver, not painted or dyed, but naturally metallic, catching the light and reflecting it in patterns that shifted as he moved. His eyes were the most striking feature, twin points of radiant gold, like stars burning in the darkness of space, with no visible pupil or iris. His hair, if it could be called that, was a cascade of fine, crystalline strands that moved as if underwater, drifting behind him in defiance of gravity. He wore robes of deep midnight blue, embroidered with constellations that slowly rotated across the fabric. But it was not just his appearance that held Elara frozen in her seat. It was the weight of his presence, the authority, the sense that this being had seen the birth and death of worlds, had held the lives of billions in his hands, had made decisions that echoed across centuries. This was no diplomat. This was no merchant prince. This was the Emperor Kael'Voryn, the eternal flame, the star-crowned, the unbroken chain. Elara's heart pounded so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. Why was the Emperor here? Outpost Vael'Thar 9 was nothing. It was a footnote in the Empire's endless ledgers. The Emperor never left the inner worlds unless something catastrophic was happening. The assembly below erupted into motion. Dignitaries dropped to their knees, pressing their foreheads to the floor. Attendants scattered, clearing a path. The servitor drones descended in perfect formation, projecting holographic symbols of reverence into the air. Kael'Voryn did not acknowledge them. He walked forward with measured steps, his gaze sweeping across the hall, and then impossibly his eyes lifted, to the upper gallery, to the translation booths, to her. Elara's blood turned to ice. No, that was not possible. He could not be looking at her. She was behind reinforced glass in a soundproofed booth. She was invisible. She was nobody. But his gaze did not waver. Those burning golden eyes locked onto hers with the precision of a laser sight, and for a moment, the entire universe seemed to collapse into that single point of connection. Then he spoke. His voice was not loud, but it filled the space effortlessly, resonating in the harmonic frequency of the Vael'Thar high tongue. "Bring her to me." Elara's screen flickered and died. Her door unlocked with a soft click. 2 Imperial Guardians materialized beside her booth, their forms shimmering into visibility as their cloaking fields deactivated. They were massive, armored in something that looked like liquid mercury, their faces hidden behind featureless helmets. One of them extended a hand toward the door. The gesture was not threatening, but it was absolute. Elara's legs did not want to move. Her mind was screaming questions. Why her? What had she done? Was this some mistake, some terrible cosmic mistake? But she stood, because what else could she do? The Guardians escorted her down from the gallery. Every step felt like walking through deep water. The hall was still silent. Every eye followed her as she descended the long staircase and crossed the polished floor toward the Emperor. Up close, Kael'Voryn was even more overwhelming. The heat radiating from him was not physical, but something else. Something that pressed against her mind, against her soul. She wanted to kneel, to look away, to disappear entirely. Instead, she stopped 3 paces from him and forced herself to meet his gaze. His expression was unreadable. Those star-bright eyes studied her with an intensity that felt like being dissected by light. "What is your name?" he asked. His voice was softer now, almost gentle, but no less commanding. Elara's mouth was dry. She swallowed once, twice. "Elara Voss, your radiance." "Elara Voss," he repeated, as if testing the shape of it. "You speak the high tongue." "Yes, your radiance." Fluently. I have studied." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but a faint lightening, a flicker of something almost like curiosity. "You are human." "Yes, your radiance. Humans do not speak the high tongue. It is beyond your physiology. Your vocal cords cannot produce the necessary harmonics." Elara's heart hammered. Was this a test? An accusation? "I trained for 6 years, your radiance. I learned to mimic the resonance patterns using breath control and vocal placement. It is imperfect, but functional." Kael'Voryn tilted his head slightly. "Imperfect," he said. "Yet you spoke it well enough to catch my attention across 3 star systems." Elara's mind reeled. 3 star systems. What did that mean? The Emperor raised one hand. Between his fingers, a small orb of light materialized, pulsing gently. It was beautiful, like a captured star shifting through colors that had no names. "Do you know what this is?" he asked. "No, your radiance. It is a Soulstone. It resonates with the presence of compatible life forces. It has been dormant for 3,000 years. He lowered his hand and the orb drifted toward Elara. "Until 6 months ago when it began to pulse. I traced the resonance to this outpost, to this archive." His eyes found hers again. "To you." The orb touched Elara's chest, just above her heart, and the world exploded into light. She gasped, staggering backward, but the Guardians were already there, steadying her. The light was inside her now, spreading through her veins like liquid fire. It did not hurt. It felt like coming home, like remembering something she had forgotten before she was born. When her vision cleared, Kael'Voryn was standing directly in front of her, close enough that she could see the faint patterns etched into his silver skin, like circuits or constellations. "You bear the mark," he said quietly, "the resonance of an ancient bond, a bond that has not been invoked in millennia." Elara's voice was barely a whisper. "I don't understand." "You will." He stepped back and addressed the assembly, his voice rising to fill the hall once more. "In 7 days, the ritual of soul binding will take place in the Grand Celestium, on Vael'Thar Prime. This human Elara Voss has been chosen by the Soulstone. She will undergo the binding as my consort and equal." The hall erupted into chaos. Voices shouted in a dozen languages, some in shock, some in outrage, some in disbelief. Elara could not hear any of it. Her ears were ringing, her knees were weak. Consort, equal, binding. This could not be real. But Kael'Voryn's hand was on her shoulder now, steadying her, and his voice was in her mind, quiet and certain. "Do not be afraid, Elara Voss. You are stronger than you know." And then he was gone, walking back toward the Starstone doors with his guardians, leaving her standing alone in the center of the hall, while the Empire's most powerful beings argued and shouted around her. Elara looked down at her hands. The light from the Soulstone still flickered faintly beneath her skin, pulsing in time with her heartbeat. Her life had just ended, or perhaps it had just begun. The transport ship that arrived for Elara 3 hours later was beyond anything she had ever seen. It was not a vessel in the traditional sense. It was a living structure, grown from biocrystalline matter that pulsed with soft bioluminescence, its hull decorated with flowing patterns that resembled both circuitry and organic tissue. The interior was even more breathtaking. Walls that seemed to be made of compressed starlight, floors of polished obsidian that reflected constellations, and air that smelled faintly of ozone and flowers that did not exist on any human world. Elara sat in a chamber designated as hers, still wearing her translator's uniform, her hands trembling in her lap. An attendant had brought her a change of clothing, a simple but elegant robe made of fabric that shifted colors with her breathing, moving from deep blue to soft silver. She had not put it on yet. She was still trying to process what had happened. Chosen by a Soulstone. For a soul binding with the Emperor of the Vael'Thar. It sounded like a fairy tale, the kind of story that mothers told their children to help them dream of better lives. Except Elara's mother had died when she was 8, and fairy tales had never been part of her childhood. The door to her chamber chimed softly, then slid open. An attendant entered, a tall being with pale lavender skin and 4 arms, their robes adorned with symbols of the imperial household. They bowed deeply. "Honored guest, you have a visitor. She claims to be family." Elara's heart lurched. Family. There was only one person who would come. "Let her in," Elara said, her voice hoarse. The attendant bowed again and withdrew. A moment later, another figure stepped through the doorway. Lyssa. Elara's older sister looked exactly as she remembered, but somehow more. Lyssa had always been beautiful, the kind of beauty that made people stop and stare. She had inherited their mother's high cheekbones, full lips, and thick dark hair that fell in perfect waves to her shoulders. Her eyes were a striking green, bright and sharp, always watching, always calculating. She wore a dress that must have cost more than Elara made in a year, a sleek emerald thing that hugged her curves and shimmered with embedded microlights. Lyssa's face broke into a radiant smile. "Elara!" She rushed forward and pulled Elara into a tight embrace. Elara stiffened instinctively, then forced herself to relax and return the hug. It had been 2 years since they had last seen each other. 2 years since their father's illness had driven a wedge between them, since Lyssa had refused to contribute to his medical bills, claiming she had her own life to build. "I can't believe it," Lyssa said, pulling back and holding Elara at arm's length, her eyes scanning her sister from head to toe. "You, chosen by the Emperor himself. Do you have any idea how incredible this is?" Elara managed a weak smile. "It's overwhelming." "Overwhelming," Lyssa laughed, a bright musical sound. "Elara, this is the opportunity of a lifetime, of 1,000 lifetimes. You're going to be the Empress. Do you understand what that means?" "I'm not going to be Empress," Elara said quietly. "The soul binding is a spiritual ceremony. I don't know what it actually entails." Lyssa waved a dismissive hand. "Details. The point is, you're going to be at his side. You'll have access to power, wealth, influence beyond anything humanity has ever known. You'll be able to change things, Elara. Really change things." There was something in Lyssa's voice that made Elara's stomach tighten, an eagerness that felt too sharp, too hungry. "How did you even get here?" Elara asked. "This ship left Veron 9 less than 3 hours ago." Lyssa's smile widened. "I have connections. You'd be surprised what doors open when you know the right people." She moved to the window, gazing out at the stars streaking past as the ship traveled through some form of faster-than-light corridor. "I've been working for a Thyrosian trade consortium for the past year, import-export, high-level negotiations. I've met some very influential people." Elara watched her sister's reflection in the window. Lyssa had always been ambitious. Even as children, she had wanted more. Better clothes, better friends, a better life. She had resented their poverty, resented their father's inability to provide, resented Elara for being content with so little. "Why are you here, Lyssa?" Elara asked quietly. Lyssa turned, her expression softening. "Because you're my sister. Because this is the most important moment of your life, and I wanted to be here for you." She crossed the room and took Elara's hands in hers. "I know we've had our differences. I know I haven't always been supportive, but this is different. This is family." Elara wanted to believe her. She wanted to believe that the warmth in Lyssa's eyes was real, that the smile on her face was genuine, but there was something underneath, something she could not quite name. "Thank you," Elara said finally. "It means a lot that you came." Lyssa squeezed her hands. "We're going to get through this together. Now tell me everything. What happened? How did he choose you?" Elara recounted the events in the archive, the appearance of the Emperor, the Soulstone, the announcement. Lyssa listened intently, her eyes never leaving Elara's face, her expression shifting between awe and something that looked almost like calculation. When Elara finished, Lyssa was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "A Soulstone. I've read about those. They're supposed to be ancient Vael'Thar artifacts used to identify compatible souls for the highest forms of bonding, but I thought they were myths." "So did I. And he said it had been dormant for 3,000 years. "Yes." Lyssa's gaze grew distant, thoughtful. 3,000 years. That means the last time it activated was during the reign of Emperor Kael'Voryn the Wise. He was bonded to a being from a species that went extinct 2 millennia ago. The bond was said to be so powerful that when she died he went into seclusion for 500 years. Elara's chest tightened. "How do you know all this?" "I told you. I've been meeting influential people. You pick up things." Lyssa's smile returned, softer now. "But that's not important. What matters is that you're the one chosen now. You, Elara. The girl who used to share a single blanket with me in that freezing apartment. The girl who spent 6 years learning an impossible language just to get a job translating trade contracts." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "You deserve this." Tears pricked Elara's eyes. She had not realized how much she needed to hear that. How much she needed someone to tell her that she was not making a terrible mistake, that she was not about to ruin everything. Lyssa pulled her into another hug, and this time Elara let herself melt into it. "Thank you," Elara whispered. "Always," Lyssa murmured against her hair. They stayed like that for a long moment, two sisters holding on to each other in the vastness of space, surrounded by alien technology and impossible futures. When they finally pulled apart, Lyssa's eyes were bright. "Now we need to get you ready. You have 7 days before the ceremony and there's a lot to do. You'll need to learn about Vael'Thar customs, about the imperial court, about how to carry yourself." She grinned. "Lucky for you, I've been studying this stuff for months. I can help." Elara hesitated. "You'd do that?" "Of course." What are sisters for? Over the next few days, as the ship traveled toward Vael'Thar Prime, Lyssa became Elara's constant companion. She helped her navigate the overwhelming protocols of imperial etiquette, taught her the subtle gestures and phrases that carried weight in the court, explained the complex web of alliances and rivalries among the ruling families of the empire. She was patient, encouraging, always ready with a reassuring word when Elara stumbled or felt overwhelmed. And Elara, desperate for an anchor in this strange new world, clung to her sister's presence like a lifeline. But there were moments, small moments, when Elara caught something in Lyssa's expression, a flicker of something dark, something hungry, when she thought Elara was not looking. A tightness around her mouth when Elara mentioned Kael'Voryn, a brightness in her eyes when she asked about the layout of the imperial palace, about who would be attending the ceremony, about the exact nature of the soul binding. Elara told herself she was imagining it, that the stress of the situation was making her paranoid, that Lyssa was here out of love, out of genuine sisterly concern. She wanted to believe that. On the 5th day, the ship emerged from the faster-than-light corridor and entered the Vael'Thar system. Elara stood at the viewing window, watching as the central planet came into view, Vael'Thar Prime. It was breathtaking. The planet was larger than Earth, its surface a tapestry of silver oceans and golden land masses, crisscrossed with massive structures that could be seen from space. Bridges that spanned entire continents, towers that reached into the upper atmosphere, cities that glowed like captured stars. Around the planet, a ring of artificial satellites formed a perfect geometric pattern, each one a small world unto itself, connected by streams of light that pulsed with energy. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Lyssa said, coming to stand beside her. "It's incredible," Elara breathed. "This is going to be your home now, Lyssa said softly. Everything down there, all of it, will be part of your life. She paused, then added, Are you scared? Elara nodded, terrified. Lyssa put an arm around her shoulders. That's normal, but you're going to be amazing, Elara. I know you are. Elara leaned into her sister's warmth, trying to draw strength from it, but somewhere deep inside, a small voice whispered a warning she was not yet ready to hear. The ship descended through the atmosphere and landed at the Grand Celestium, the central palace of the Empire. It was not a building. It was a monument, a cathedral of light and stone and living crystal, built over 10,000 years by hundreds of generations of Vael'Thar artisans. Spires reached toward the sky like frozen flames, and the walls shimmered with embedded stardust that made the entire structure glow softly even in daylight. As Elara descended from the ship, flanked by Imperial guardians and attendants, she saw the crowds gathered beyond the landing platform. Thousands of beings representing hundreds of species all come to witness the arrival of the human chosen by the Emperor. And at the center of it all, standing at the top of the grand staircase, was Kael'Voryn. He wore robes of pure white that contrasted starkly with his silver skin, and his golden eyes were fixed on her with an intensity that made the air feel thin. Elara walked toward him, her legs shaking, her heart pounding so hard she thought everyone must be able to hear it. When she reached the base of the stairs, she knelt as she had been taught. Kael'Voryn descended the steps slowly, each movement deliberate and graceful. When he reached her, he extended a hand. Rise, Elara Voss, he said, his voice carrying across the plaza. You kneel to no one, not anymore. Elara looked up, startled, and took his hand. His touch was warm, warmer than she expected, and the moment their skin made contact, she felt it again. That resonance, that connection that had sparked in the archive. It was stronger now, a thrumming pulse that seemed to sync her heartbeat with his. He pulled her gently to her feet, and for a moment they stood face to face, surrounded by thousands, but entirely alone. Welcome home, he said quietly, and there was something in his voice that sounded almost like relief. Elara's breath caught. Home. She had never had a home. Not really. But before she could respond, before she could even process what she was feeling, Lyssa's voice cut through the moment. Your radiance! Elara turned to see her sister stepping forward, her expression bright and eager. She dropped into a perfect curtsy, deeper and more elaborate than anything she had taught Elara. Forgive the intrusion, Your Radiance, but I am Lyssa Voss, sister to your chosen. I wanted to offer my congratulations and my service in any capacity you might require. Kael'Voryn's gaze shifted to Lyssa, and Elara saw something flicker in his expression, not interest exactly, but acknowledgement. You are welcome in the Celestium, Lyssa Voss, he said formally. Any family of Elara's is honored here. Lyssa's smile was radiant. Thank you, Your Radiance. It is the greatest honor of my life. And as Elara watched her sister rise, watched the way Lyssa's eyes followed the Emperor, watched the way her smile lingered, just a heartbeat too long, that small voice of warning grew louder. But she pushed it down, because Lyssa was her sister, and sisters did not betray each other. The chambers assigned to Elara were beyond anything she could have imagined. They occupied an entire wing of the Grand Celestium, with rooms that flowed into one another like water, each space designed with such artistry that it felt less like architecture and more like poetry made physical. The walls were living crystal that changed color with the time of day, shifting from soft dawn gold to deep twilight purple. The windows overlooked gardens that defied the laws of nature, trees with silver leaves that sang in harmonics when the wind blew, flowers that bloomed in colors that hurt to look at directly, fountains that flowed upward instead of down. Elara stood on the balcony of her sleeping chamber, watching the twin suns of Vael'Thar set over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of crimson and violet. She wore the robe they had given her, the one that shifted colors with her emotions. Right now it was a deep, uncertain blue. 2 days until the soul-binding ceremony, 2 days until her life changed forever in ways she could not begin to understand. A soft chime announced a visitor. Elara turned as the door opened, and a figure entered. It was not human, not Vael'Thar, but something else entirely. The being was small, barely reaching Elara's shoulder, with pale blue skin that seemed translucent in certain lights, revealing delicate structures beneath, like living stained glass. Their eyes were large and dark, without whites or pupils, and their movements were graceful, almost floating. They bowed deeply. Honored chosen, I am Meraith, voice of the Celestial Archives. I have been assigned as your guide and teacher in preparation for the binding. Thank you, Elara said, gesturing to the seating area near the window. Please sit. Mirith settled onto one of the cushions with fluid grace. You have questions. This is natural. The soul binding is not well understood outside the Vael'Thar, and even among my people its true nature is known to few. What exactly is it? Elara asked, sitting across from them. Kael'Voryn said I was chosen by the Soulstone, but what does that mean? Mirith was silent for a moment, as if choosing their words carefully. The Vael'Thar are an ancient species, so ancient that their origins are lost even to them. But they were not always immortal. In their early history they were mortal, fragile, dying after mere centuries. It was their fear of death that drove them to seek transcendence. Mirith's hands moved as they spoke, weaving shapes in the air that left faint trails of light, forming symbols and patterns. They discovered a way to bind their consciousness to the fabric of the universe itself, to anchor their souls to the cosmic resonance. This made them immortal, but it came at a cost. They lost something in the process, the ability to truly connect, to feel, to love in the way mortal beings do. Elara listened, her heart beating faster. The soul binding was created as a solution, a way for a Vael'Thar to forge a connection with another being so profound that it restores what was lost. It is not marriage in the human sense. It is deeper. It is two souls recognizing each other across the void and choosing to become one without losing themselves. But why me? Elara whispered. I'm nobody, just a translator from Earth. How could a Soulstone choose me? Mirith's dark eyes studied her with an intensity that felt like being seen all the way through. The Soulstone does not choose based on status or species. It resonates with something deeper. Some call it destiny. Others call it the echo of past lives. The Vael'Thar believe that souls exist in a pattern, repeating and transforming across time and space. The Soulstone recognizes a pattern that matches its bearer. You're saying Kael'Voryn and I were meant to find each other? I am saying the universe arranged for you to be in the same moment, and the Soulstone recognized something that neither of you may yet understand. Mirith's expression softened. Do not fear this, honored chosen. The binding cannot be forced. When the ceremony takes place, you will know if the resonance is true, and if it is, you will feel it not as a loss, but as a becoming. Elara looked down at her hands. The faint pulse of light from the Soulstone still flickered beneath her skin, visible only in shadow. What happens if the resonance isn't true? Then the binding will fail, and you will return to your life unchanged. Mirith paused. But the Soulstone has never awakened for a false match, not in all of recorded history. Before Elara could respond, the door chimed again. Mirith rose smoothly. I will leave you to your preparations. If you have further questions, you need only call for me. They bowed and departed, passing Lyssa in the doorway. Lyssa entered with a bright smile, carrying a tray laden with food. I thought you might be hungry. The attendant said you haven't eaten since this morning. Elara realized with a start that it was true. She had been so consumed with anxiety that she had forgotten entirely. Thank you. Lyssa set the tray on the low table and settled beside her sister. What did the little blue one want? They were explaining the soul binding to me. And? Lyssa's eyes were sharp with curiosity. Elara recounted what Mirith had said, watching her sister's face as she spoke. Lyssa listened intently, her expression thoughtful. So it's permanent, Lyssa said when Elara finished. Once the binding happens, you're connected to him forever. If it's real, if the resonance is true, it will be, Lyssa said with certainty. The Soulstone chose you, Elara. That means something. She picked up a piece of fruit from the tray, something that looked like a cross between a peach and a star, and bit into it thoughtfully. You're nervous, terrified. That's understandable. But you need to remember something. Lyssa turned to face her fully. This isn't just about you and him, this is about humanity. You're going to be the first human ever bound to a Vael'Thar Emperor. Do you understand what that represents? The legitimacy it gives our species, the doors it opens. Elara frowned. I'm not doing this for politics, Lyssa. I know, but that doesn't change the reality. Whether you want it or not, you're going to become a symbol, and symbols have power. Lyssa's voice grew more animated. You could change everything, Elara. The way the Empire sees humans, the way we're treated, the opportunities we're given. You could be the voice for billions of people who have no voice. That's too much pressure, Elara said quietly. You can handle it. You're stronger than you think. Lyssa reached out and took her hand. But you'll need allies, people you can trust, People who understand the political landscape. She paused. I've been thinking, I could stay here, in the Celestium, help you navigate the court, be your advisor, your liaison. You're going to need someone who knows how this world works. Elara looked at her sister, seeing the eagerness in her eyes, the hunger that she had noticed before but tried to ignore. You want to stay here, in the palace? I want to help you, Lyssa said earnestly. You're my sister, and this is important. Too important for you to face alone. There was logic to it. Elara did not know anything about the imperial court, about the politics and intrigue that surely filled these halls. Having someone she could trust, someone who shared her blood, made sense. But that small voice of warning whispered again. Let me think about it, Elara said finally. Lyssa's smile tightened, just for a moment, then returned to its usual warmth. Of course. Take your time. I just want you to know the offer is there. They sat together for a while longer, eating in silence, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Eventually, Lyssa rose to leave, kissing Elara on the forehead like she used to when they were children. Get some rest, she said. Tomorrow is going to be a big day, the final preparations before the ceremony. After she left, Elara sat alone in the growing darkness, her thoughts churning. She wanted to trust Lyssa. She wanted to believe that her sister's intentions were pure, that she was here out of love and concern. But something felt wrong, something she could not name. The next day, Elara was taken to the preparation chamber, a vast circular room deep in the heart of the Celestium. The walls were covered in ancient inscriptions in the old tongue, and the floor was a massive mandala of inlaid crystal that glowed with its own internal light. Attendants moved around her, draping her in ceremonial garments, weaving her hair with strands of starlight-infused thread, marking her skin with temporary sigils in luminous ink that would guide the resonance during the binding. Mirith oversaw the process, their voice soft and constant, explaining each step, each symbol, each meaning. But Elara could barely focus. Her mind kept drifting to tomorrow, to the moment when she would stand before the Emperor and the entire empire would watch as her soul was laid bare. Midway through the preparation, the chamber doors opened and Kael'Voryn entered. Everyone immediately dropped to their knees, pressing foreheads to the floor. Elara, halfway through having a complex braided pattern woven into her hair, froze in place. Leave us, Kael'Voryn said quietly. The attendants fled without a word. Mirith hesitated, their large eyes flicking between Elara and the Emperor, then bowed deeply and departed as well. The doors closed, leaving them alone. Kael'Voryn approached slowly, his robes whispering against the crystal floor. Up close, without the crowds, without the ceremony, he seemed less overwhelming. Still powerful, still radiating that presence that made reality bend, but also somehow more human, or at least more vulnerable. I am told the preparations are going well, he said. Yes, your radiance. Kyle, he corrected gently. When we are alone, you may call me Kyle. Elara's breath caught. I'm not sure that's appropriate. Many things about this situation are not appropriate, he said with something that might have been amusement. But here we are. He stopped a few paces from her, his golden eyes studying her face. Are you afraid of me? Yes, Elara admitted. Good. You should be. I am very old, Elara Voss. I have seen civilizations rise and fall. I have made decisions that cost billions of lives. I carry the weight of an empire on my shoulders, and I do not always carry it well. He paused. But I am also afraid of you. Elara blinked. What? The binding is not one-sided. When it happens, I will be as exposed to you as you are to me. You will see everything I am, every failure, every regret, every moment of weakness. His voice dropped. And I have lived a very long time. There is much darkness in me. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know what you are agreeing to. Because I do not want you to enter this binding without understanding that it will change you, that it will show you things you may not want to see. He moved closer, and now she could see the faint lines around his eyes, the weight of ages in his expression. You can still refuse. Even now, even tomorrow, at the ceremony. If you speak the word of refusal, the binding will stop, and you will be free to leave. No shame, no punishment. I will ensure your safe return to Earth and provide for you for the rest of your life. Elara stared at him. This being who commanded galaxies was offering her an escape, offering her freedom. Why would you do that, she whispered. Because a binding forged without true willingness is a prison for both souls. His hand reached out, hesitating, then gently touched the side of her face. His fingers were warm, and that resonance flared again, stronger now, a pulse that seemed to echo in her chest. "I will not trap you, Elara, even if the Soulstone has chosen, even if destiny has arranged this. You must choose it too." Tears stung Elara's eyes. She had spent her entire life feeling small, feeling powerless, feeling like the universe pushed her where it wanted, and she had no say. And now this being, this emperor who could reshape worlds with a word, was telling her the choice was hers. "I'm terrified," she said, her voice breaking. "So am I," he admitted. "But perhaps we can be terrified together." She laughed, a small, shaky sound, and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. He brushed them away gently with his thumb. "Think on it tonight," he said, "and tomorrow when you stand before me in the Celestium, give me your answer." He stepped back, bowed slightly, an emperor bowing to her, which felt impossible, and turned to leave. "Kael," she said, and he stopped. "Thank you for giving me the choice." He looked back at her, and for the first time, she saw something soft in his expression, something almost like hope. "It was never mine to take," he said. Then he was gone, and Elara was alone in the chamber, her heart pounding, her mind spinning. Tomorrow she would give her answer. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, for the first time since this began, she felt something other than fear. She felt possibility. The morning of the soul-binding ceremony, Elara woke before dawn. She had barely slept, her mind turning over everything that had happened, everything that was about to happen. The choice Kael had given her sat heavy in her chest. She could refuse, she could walk away, return to Earth, to her father, to her small life as a translator. But something had changed in her. The fear was still there, sharp and real, but beneath it was something else. Curiosity, wonder, and perhaps against all logic and reason, hope. She rose from the bed and walked to the window. The sky was just beginning to lighten, the twin suns of Vael'Thar still hidden below the horizon. The gardens below were illuminated by bioluminescent plants that glowed softly in the darkness, creating patterns of light that looked like constellations brought down to Earth. A soft knock at the door. Elara turned as Mireth entered, followed by a procession of attendants carrying ceremonial garments. "The hour approaches, honored chosen," Mireth said quietly. "It is time to prepare." The next 3 hours passed in a blur of ritual. The attendants bathed her in water infused with minerals from the core of a dying star, dressed her in robes of pure white that seemed to be woven from light itself, and adorned her with jewelry made of crystallized cosmic dust that hummed with faint harmonics. They painted intricate patterns on her skin with luminous ink, each symbol representing an aspect of the soul: courage, compassion, wisdom, strength, vulnerability. When they were finished, Elara barely recognized herself in the mirror. She looked like something out of myth, something divine, but her eyes were the same, brown, human, filled with fear and wonder in equal measure. Mireth approached, carrying a small box. "This is the final piece." They opened the box to reveal a circlet of silver metal, so fine it looked like spun moonlight. Embedded in the center was a fragment of the Soulstone that had chosen her, pulsing with soft light. Mireth placed it gently on Elara's head. The moment it touched her skin, warmth flooded through her, and the resonance that had been flickering beneath her surface flared bright and strong. She gasped, gripping the edge of the table for support. "The Soulstone recognizes you," Mireth said softly. "It knows you are ready." "I don't feel ready," Elara whispered. "No one ever does. But that is the nature of great transformations. They come whether we feel prepared or not." Mireth's large dark eyes held hers. "The choice is still yours, honored chosen. Until the moment you speak the words of acceptance, you can walk away. Remember that." Elara nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in her throat. A chime echoed through the chamber. Mireth straightened. It is time. The Grand Celestium had been transformed. The vast central hall, which could hold tens of thousands, was now arranged for the soul-binding ceremony. The floor had been cleared, revealing the massive mandala beneath, a circular pattern of inlaid crystal and precious metals that stretched 100 feet across. At the center was a raised dais, and above it, suspended in mid-air by forces Elara could not comprehend, hung a sphere of pure light the size of a human head, the Soulstone, manifested in its full form. The hall was packed. Beings from across the Empire had come to witness this unprecedented event. Elara could see Vael'Thar nobles in their shimmering robes, Therosian merchants with their multiple arms, Korvati warriors in their ceremonial armor, and countless other species she could not identify, all of them watching, waiting. At the edge of the crowd, Elara spotted Lyssa. Her sister wore a dress of deep emerald that caught the light beautifully, and her face was radiant with what looked like pride. She caught Elara's eye and mouthed, "You're beautiful." Elara tried to smile, but her face felt frozen. The crowd parted as she walked forward, flanked by Imperial guardians. Every step echoed in the vast space, and she could feel the weight of thousands of eyes on her. Her hands trembled, but she kept them clasped in front of her, hidden in the folds of her robes. When she reached the edge of the mandala, she stopped. On the opposite side, the doors opened, and Kael'Voryn entered. He wore robes of midnight blue, so dark they seemed to absorb light, embroidered with patterns that moved and shifted like living things. His silver skin gleamed, and his golden eyes were fixed on her with an intensity that made the air feel thin. But there was something else in his expression now, something gentle, something that said, "I see you, I know you are afraid. I am afraid too." He walked to the opposite edge of the mandala and stopped, facing her across the expanse of glowing crystal. A figure stepped forward between them. An ancient Vael'Thar, older even than Kael, with skin that had taken on a faint golden hue and eyes that glowed white instead of gold. This was the High Arbiter, the keeper of the oldest rituals. The Arbiter's voice, when they spoke, resonated through the hall without need for amplification. "We gather to witness the binding of souls, a ceremony as old as our species, as sacred as the stars themselves. Two beings stand before us, chosen by the Soulstone, called by destiny to forge a connection that transcends flesh and time." The Arbiter raised their hands, and the Soulstone above the dais pulsed brighter. "Kael'Voryn, Emperor of the Vael'Thar, eternal flame, star-crowned, do you come to this binding of your own free will?" "I do," Kael said, his voice steady and clear. "And do you understand that this binding, once forged, cannot be undone? That your soul will be joined with another, for all the ages that remain to you?" "I understand and accept." The Arbiter turned to Elara. "Elara Voss of Earth, human, chosen of the Soulstone, do you come to this binding of your own free will?" This was it. The moment. The choice. Elara's mouth was dry. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She looked at Kael across the mandala, and he looked back at her with those burning golden eyes that somehow, impossibly, held gentleness. She thought of her life on Earth, her tiny apartment, her father struggling with illness, her years of loneliness and quiet desperation. She thought of her sister, standing in the crowd watching with bright, eager eyes, and she thought of possibility, of connection, of a universe that had arranged for her to be in the right place at the right time, for reasons she could not understand, but could perhaps trust. "I do," she said, and her voice was stronger than she expected. "And do you understand that this binding, once forged, cannot be undone? That your soul will be joined with another, for all the ages that remain to you?" "I understand and accept." The Arbiter's expression shifted into something that might have been approval. "Then let the binding begin." The Arbiter stepped back, and the mandala beneath their feet flared to life. Light raced along the carved channels, filling the patterns with radiance. The Soulstone above pulsed in rhythm with Elara's heartbeat, and she felt the resonance that had been flickering inside her roar to life like a star igniting. "Approach," the Arbiter commanded. Elara and Kael walked forward, stepping onto the mandala. With each step the light grew brighter, the resonance stronger. The air itself seemed to vibrate with energy. When they reached the center and stood beneath the Soulstone, facing each other with barely 2 feet between them, the sensation was overwhelming. Elara could feel Kael's presence not just in front of her, but inside her, a warmth spreading through her chest, her mind, her very essence. "Join hands," the Arbiter said. Kael extended his hands, palms up. Elara placed her hands in his, and the moment their skin touched, the world exploded into light. It was not painful. It was the opposite of pain. It was every good feeling Elara had ever experienced, compressed into a single moment and multiplied by infinity. She gasped, her knees buckling, but Kael held her steady, his grip firm and warm. And then she was not just herself anymore. She was him too. She felt his memories, his emotions, his thoughts, flowing into her like a river breaking through a dam. She saw his childhood, millennia ago, when the Vael'Thar was still learning what it meant to be immortal. She felt his loneliness, the terrible isolation that came with living so long, that everyone around him became temporary, fleeting, gone before he could truly know them. She felt his grief for the thousands he had loved and lost, for the mistakes he had made, for the weight of ruling an empire when every decision had consequences that echoed for centuries. But she also felt his hope, his desperate, hidden hope, that perhaps, just perhaps, the Soulstone had found someone who could understand, someone who could see all of him, the light and the darkness, and choose to stay. And he was inside her too. She felt his awareness of her life, her struggles, her poverty and pain and quiet resilience. He saw her working late into the night to master an impossible language, sending money home to her father, even when she could barely afford to eat, choosing kindness when the world had given her every reason to be cruel. He saw her fear and her courage, her doubt and her determination, and beneath it all, the resonance, the connection, the recognition that their souls, whatever that truly meant, fit together like pieces of a puzzle that had been separated since the beginning of time. The Soulstone descended from above, lowering until it hovered between their joined hands. Then it shattered, breaking into 1,000 fragments of light that poured into them both, sealing the connection, making it permanent. Elara heard herself cry out, felt tears streaming down her face, but they were not tears of pain. They were tears of recognition, of relief, of finding something she had not known she was missing. When the light finally faded, when the resonance settled into a steady, thrumming pulse that lived in her chest like a second heartbeat, Elara opened her eyes and looked at Kael. He was crying too, silver tears that glowed faintly as they traced down his face. "I see you," he whispered in the old tongue, the language of the Soulstone. "I see you," she whispered back. And she did. She saw all of him, and he was beautiful and terrible and ancient and vulnerable, and she was not afraid anymore. The Arbiter's voice broke through the moment. "The binding is complete. They are one soul in two bodies, two hearts beating as one. Let all who witness know that this bond is sacred and eternal." The hall erupted into sound. Some species cheered, others made their own forms of celebration, and the noise was overwhelming after the profound silence of the binding. But Elara barely heard it. She was still looking at Kael, still feeling the connection that now lived between them, strong and unbreakable. He pulled her into his arms, and she melted into his embrace, feeling safe and whole for the first time in her life. "Thank you," he murmured against her hair. "Thank you for choosing this, for choosing me. Thank you for giving me the choice," she whispered back. They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other at the center of the mandala, while the Empire celebrated around them. And then Elara felt it, a cold spike of emotion that did not belong to her or to Kael. Something foreign, something dark, slipping through the crowd like a shadow. She pulled back slightly and scanned the assembly. Her eyes found Lyssa. Her sister was not cheering. She was standing perfectly still, her face frozen in a smile that did not reach her eyes. And in those eyes, just for a moment, Elara saw something that made her blood run cold. Rage. Pure, undiluted rage. Then it was gone, hidden behind the bright smile, and Lyssa was clapping and cheering with the rest of the crowd. But Elara had seen it, and through the bond, Kael had felt her sudden spike of fear. "What is it?" he asked quietly, his voice concerned. Elara looked up at him, wanting to explain, wanting to warn him. But how could she? How could she say that her own sister, the person who had been helping her, supporting her, might be feeling something dark and dangerous? "Nothing," she said finally. "I'm just overwhelmed." Kael studied her face, and she knew he could feel the lie through the bond, but he did not press. "We will talk later," he said gently. "For now, let us finish the ceremony." The celebration continued, and Elara forced herself to smile and accept congratulations from beings she had never met, speaking languages she barely understood. All the while, she was aware of Lyssa moving through the crowd, her smile bright, her words gracious. And Elara knew, with a certainty that settled like ice in her stomach, that something terrible was about to happen. The bond had shown her Kael's soul, but she was beginning to fear that she had never truly known her sisters at all. The days following the soul-binding ceremony passed in a whirlwind of formalities, celebrations and introductions. Elara was presented to the High Council, the governing body of the Empire's inner worlds. She attended state dinners where she met ambassadors from species she had only read about in her translation work. She walked through halls of power on Kael's arm, feeling the eyes of the entire Empire watching her every move. Through it all, the bond hummed between them, a constant presence that both comforted and overwhelmed her. She could feel Kael's emotions like distant music, his thoughts brushing against hers when their minds wandered toward each other. It was intimate in a way she had never experienced, and she found herself cherishing the quiet moments when they could simply be together, speaking without words, understanding without explanation. But there was something else too, a shadow at the edge of her awareness. The memory of Lyssa's expression during the ceremony, that flash of rage that had disappeared so quickly, Elara might have imagined it, except she knew she had not imagined it. Lyssa had remained in the Celestium, accepting the position Elara had not yet formally offered as her advisor and liaison. She moved through the palace with confidence, making connections, attending minor court functions, always present at the periphery of Elara's new life. She was helpful, attentive, always ready with advice or a comforting word. And yet, Elara found herself pulling away, making excuses, keeping their conversations brief and superficial. She had not told Kael about her suspicions. How could she? What would she say? My sister looked angry for half a second during our ceremony, and now I think she might be dangerous. It sounded absurd, even in her own mind, but the bond did not lie. Kael felt her unease, her growing anxiety, even when she tried to hide it. On the 5th night after the binding, as they sat together in their private chambers overlooking the palace gardens, Kael finally spoke. "You are troubled," he said quietly. They were sitting close on a low couch, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting against his chest. Through the bond, she could feel his concern, his desire to help, but also his patience. He would not force her to speak. "I don't know if I'm seeing things that are not there," Elara said finally, "or if I'm ignoring something obvious. Tell me." Elara hesitated, then took a breath. "It's Lyssa, my sister. During the ceremony, I saw something in her face. Anger, rage. It was only for a moment, but it was real." Kael was silent, his hand gently stroking her hair. "What do you think it means?" "I don't know. Maybe she was just overwhelmed. Maybe she resents that I got this opportunity and she did not. Or maybe—" Elara trailed off. "Maybe what? Maybe I never really knew her at all." Kael pulled back slightly so he could look at her face. His golden eyes were soft with understanding. "Family is complicated, especially siblings. The bonds of blood do not always mean the bonds of love. She came here to support me," Elara said, but the words sounded hollow even to her own ears. "She helped me prepare. She was kind. People can be kind and still harbor darkness," Kael said gently. "It does not make you foolish for not seeing it. It makes you human." He paused. "Do you want me to have her watched?" "No," Elara said quickly, then felt guilty for the relief that surged through her. "Maybe. I don't know. I don't want to be the person who suspects her own sister of what? I don't even know what I'm suspecting." Kael took her hand, pressing it against his chest, where she could feel his heartbeat, strong and steady, sinking with her own through the bond. "I will have her watched discreetly, not as an accusation but as a precaution. If your instincts are telling you something is wrong, we should listen. Instincts exist for a reason." Elara nodded, feeling both grateful and guilty. "Thank you. You do not need to thank me. We are bound, Elara. Your concerns are my concerns. Your safety is my priority." She leaned into him, drawing comfort from his presence, from the bond that thrummed between them like a living thing. "I'm still getting used to this, to not being alone." "I know," he murmured. "So am I." They sat in silence for a long time, watching the moons rise over the gardens, holding on to each other in the vastness of the Empire. But even as Elara let herself relax, even as she felt the warmth of Kael's presence surrounding her, she could not shake the feeling that something dark was moving in the shadows, something patient, something waiting. Lyssa stood in a private alcove deep in the palace, far from the main halls, speaking to a figure cloaked in shadow. The figure was Vael'Thar, but not one of the nobility. This was someone from the outer edges of society, someone who dealt in secrets and favors. "It is as I suspected," Lyssa said, her voice low and controlled. "The bond is real. She has him completely. Every emotion, every thought, flowing between them like water." "Then your plan is over before it began," the figure said, their voice like wind through dead leaves. "A bonded pair cannot be separated. It would kill them both." "I do not need to separate them," Lyssa said, her smile sharp and cold. "I just need him to doubt her." The figure tilted their head. "Explain." "The bond shows them each other's souls, but it does not show them the truth of the world around them. It does not protect them from lies spoken by others, from evidence planted, from doubts whispered in the right ears at the right times. You wish to turn the Emperor against his bonded mate? That is madness. The bond will tell him she is innocent. The bond will tell him what she feels, but feelings can be misinterpreted. Fear can look like guilt. Confusion can look like deception. Lyssa's eyes glittered in the dim light. I've spent years learning how to manipulate people, how to read them, how to make them see what I want them to see. An emperor is still just a man, ancient, powerful, but lonely. So desperately lonely. And lonely people are the easiest to deceive. What do you gain from this? Everything, Lyssa said simply. She has taken everything that should have been mine. The attention, the opportunity, the power. I am the elder sister. I am the one who fought for every scrap of success I have, and she, simple, naive Elara, gets chosen by a Soulstone and handed an empire. The Soulstone chose her. You cannot change destiny. I do not believe in destiny, Lyssa said coldly. I believe in taking what you want, and I want what she has. She leaned closer to the figure. Can you do what I asked? The figure was silent for a long moment, then reached into their robes and pulled out a small vial filled with dark liquid. This is Shadow Bloom Essence. 3 drops in her food or drink, and she will begin to experience vivid nightmares, paranoia, and emotional instability. The effects build slowly over weeks. To observers, it will appear as if the stress of her new position is breaking her. To the Emperor, it will feel through the bond like she is hiding something, like she is fragmenting. Lyssa took the vial, holding it up to the light. And it is undetectable? By conventional means, yes. Only the most advanced medical scans would reveal it, and even then only if they knew what to look for. Perfect. Lyssa tucked the vial into her dress. Begin spreading rumors in the outer courts. Nothing overt, just whispers. Questions about why a human was chosen. Doubts about whether the bond is real or if the Emperor was somehow deceived. Make them gentle, plausible. I want seeds of doubt planted in every corner of this palace. This is a dangerous game you play, the figure warned. If you are discovered. I will not be discovered, Lyssa interrupted, because no one suspects the devoted sister. No one looks twice at the supportive sibling who only wants to help. Her smile widened. And by the time anyone realizes what is happening, it will be too late. The figure bowed and melted back into the shadows, leaving Lyssa alone in the alcove. She stood there for a moment, turning the vial over in her hands, feeling its weight. Then she tucked it away and composed her features into the warm, concerned expression she had perfected over the past weeks. She had work to do. Over the following days, Elara began to notice changes. Small things at first. A diplomat who had been warm during their first meeting now seemed distant, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. A council member who asked pointed questions about human loyalty, about whether the bond could be trusted when it crossed species lines. Servants who whispered and fell silent when she entered a room. She told herself it was normal, that she was new to this world, that suspicion and political maneuvering were part of court life, that she needed to develop a thicker skin. But it wore on her. Each suspicious glance, each whispered conversation that stopped when she approached, each smile that felt false, it all accumulated like stones in her chest, making it harder to breathe. And then the nightmares began. The first one came a week after her conversation with Kael. She dreamed she was standing in the ceremony hall again, but this time when the binding happened, she saw not Kael's soul, but something dark and writhing, something that wrapped around her and pulled her down into an abyss. She woke gasping, her heart racing, Kael's arms immediately around her. A nightmare, he murmured, his presence flooding through the bond, warm and soothing. Nothing more. But the next night it happened again, and the night after that. The dreams grew worse, more vivid, more terrifying. She dreamed of betraying Kael, of speaking words she did not mean, of watching him turn away from her in disgust. She dreamed of the empire burning, of billions dying, and it was somehow her fault. She dreamed of Lyssa standing over her with a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. She began to dread sleep. She would lie awake for hours, feeling Kael's concern through the bond, knowing he felt her fear but not understanding its source. How could she explain dreams? How could she tell him that her own mind seemed to be turning against her? During the day, she found it harder to concentrate. Her thoughts felt scattered, fragmented. She would lose track of conversations, forget names, miss important details. The council members began to exchange glances when she spoke. She could feel their judgment, their doubt. And through it all, Lyssa was there, supportive, concerned, always ready with a kind word or a gentle suggestion. You look tired, Elara. Maybe you should rest. Don't worry about what they think. You're doing wonderfully. Here, I brought you some tea. It will help you relax." The tea. Lyssa brought her tea almost every evening, a special blend she claimed would help with stress. Elara drank it gratefully, desperate for anything that might quiet her racing thoughts and let her sleep. She did not notice that the nightmares grew worse each time she drank it. Kael noticed the changes in Elara. How could he not? Through the bond, he felt her growing anxiety, her confusion, her fear, but when he tried to talk to her about it, she deflected, insisting she was fine, just adjusting, just tired. He consulted with the palace physicians. They found nothing wrong. He spoke with Miraith, who suggested that the bond was still settling, that the adjustment period could be difficult. But something felt wrong. The bond showed him Elara's emotions, but they were becoming increasingly chaotic, harder to interpret. Fear mixed with guilt, mixed with confusion, in patterns that made no sense. He ordered his most trusted guardian to investigate discreetly, to watch for anything unusual, anyone who might be influencing Elara. The guardian reported back. Elara Voss had been seen meeting with several minor court functionaries, but nothing overtly suspicious. She had been asking questions about imperial law, about the bond, about what would happen if a bonded pair were separated. Separated? Kael's voice was sharp. She claimed it was academic curiosity, Your Radiance, that she wanted to understand her sister's new position better. Kael dismissed the guardian and sat alone in his study, staring out at the night sky. Academic curiosity, perhaps. But combined with Elara's growing instability, with the strange reports he was hearing from the council about her erratic behavior, about her difficulty focusing, he thought back to the ceremony, to the moment when he had felt Elara's sudden spike of fear as she looked at her sister, the moment he had felt but not fully understood. Slowly, pieces began to form a pattern, a terrible pattern. But he needed proof. He needed to be certain. Because if he was right, if Lyssa Voss was somehow harming Elara, manipulating her, poisoning her, the rage that surged through him was cold and absolute. He had not felt anger like this in centuries, but the bond amplified everything, and his protective instinct toward Elara was overwhelming. He forced himself to breathe, to think clearly. Moving too quickly would alert Lyssa if she was indeed responsible. He needed to be smart, strategic. He needed to protect his bonded mate without making things worse. Kael rose and walked to the window, looking out at the vast palace complex. Somewhere in these halls, if his suspicions were correct, a threat moved freely, wearing a smile and speaking kind words while slowly destroying the person he had bound his soul to. He would find the truth. And if Lyssa Voss had truly done what he suspected, she would learn that an emperor's mercy had limits. Even for the sister of his beloved. 3 weeks after the soul-binding ceremony, Elara could no longer recognize herself. She stood before the mirror in her chambers, staring at the hollow-eyed stranger looking back at her. Her skin had lost its color, her hands trembled constantly, and her mind felt like it was fracturing into pieces she could not hold together. The nightmares had become unbearable. She was afraid to sleep, afraid to eat, afraid to speak because she could no longer trust her own thoughts. Was that conversation real, or had she imagined it? Had she said something terrible to a council member, or had that been a dream? She could not tell anymore. Reality and nightmare had blurred into one endless waking horror, and through it all, the bond pulsed between her and Kael, carrying her chaos directly into his awareness. She could feel his growing concern, his confusion, his desperate attempts to help her, but she could not explain what was happening because she did not understand it herself. She was breaking, and she did not know why. A knock at the door. Elara turned, her heart racing for no reason she could name. Lyssa entered carrying a tray with a teapot and cup. Her face was creased with concern, her eyes warm and sisterly. "Elara, you look terrible. Have you slept at all?" "I can't," Elara whispered. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, thin and fragile. "The dreams—" I know. Lyssa set the tray down and poured the tea, that special blend she had been bringing every evening. "Here, drink this, it will help." Elara stared at the cup. Something in her mind, some small voice buried beneath the chaos, whispered a warning. But the voice was so faint, so easily drowned out by the exhaustion and fear that consumed her. She took the cup with shaking hands and drank. The tea was bitter tonight, more bitter than usual. She forced it down, desperate for anything that might quiet her mind. Lyssa watched her with that concerned expression, then sat beside her on the couch. "Elara, I need to talk to you about something. I've been hearing things, whispers in the court." Elara's chest tightened. What kind of whispers? People are starting to question the bond. They're saying that you're unstable, that maybe the Soulstone made a mistake, that maybe... Lyssa hesitated, as if reluctant to continue. Maybe what? Elara's voice was barely audible. That maybe you're not strong enough for this, that the bond is breaking you, and that it would be kinder to dissolve it before it destroys you completely. The words hit Elara like physical blows. The bond can't be dissolved. Kael told me. Kael told you what you needed to hear to accept the binding, Lyssa said softly. But the truth is more complicated. There are ancient rituals, emergency protocols. If a bond is causing harm to one or both parties, if it's unstable or dangerous, it can be severed. It's rare, but it's possible. Elara felt tears streaming down her face. I don't want to lose him. I don't want to lose the bond. I know, sweetheart, but look at yourself. You're falling apart. The nightmares, the confusion, the way you can barely function, this isn't normal. Maybe the bond is rejecting you. Maybe your human physiology isn't compatible after all. No, Elara said, but the word had no strength behind it. I'm just trying to help you see clearly, Lyssa continued, her voice gentle and reasonable. I don't want you to suffer, and I don't want you to damage Kael either. Through the bond, you're hurting him too. Every bit of your chaos is flowing into him. You're poisoning him, Elara. The guilt that surged through Elara was overwhelming. She had felt Kael's distress through the bond, felt how her instability was affecting him. She had been so focused on her own suffering that she had not fully processed how she was hurting him. What should I do? She whispered. Lyssa took her hands. There's a council meeting tomorrow. The High Council is going to formally address the concerns about the bond. They're going to ask Kael to consider dissolution for both your sakes. She paused. I think you should agree. I think you should let him go before this destroys you both. Elara pulled her hands away, wrapping her arms around herself. I can't. I love him. I know you do, and he loves you. But sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is walk away. Before Elara could respond, the door opened and Kael entered. His face was drawn, his golden eyes shadowed with exhaustion. Through the bond, Elara felt his weariness, his worry, his love for her that burned bright even through all the chaos. Lyssa stood immediately. Your radiance. I was just checking on Elara. Kael's gaze flickered to her, then to Elara. Leave us, please. Lyssa bowed and departed, but not before Elara caught the briefest flash of satisfaction in her sister's eyes. Kael crossed the room and knelt in front of Elara, taking her trembling hands in his. Elara, please, tell me what is happening to you. Let me help. I don't know, Elara said brokenly. I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm trying to hold on, but everything is falling apart and I can't. Breathe, Kael said firmly, pulling her into his arms. Just breathe. I am here. You are not alone. Elara clung to him, feeling the steadiness of his presence through the bond, the unwavering certainty of his love. It was the only real thing in a world that had become nightmarish and unstable. The council wants to dissolve the bond, she whispered against his chest. Kael went very still. Who told you that? Lyssa. She said there's a meeting tomorrow, that they're going to ask you to consider it. Kael pulled back, his expression hardening. There is a meeting tomorrow, but it is not about dissolution. It is about finding out what is happening to you, about getting you help. But Lyssa said, I do not care what Lyssa said, Kael interrupted, his voice sharp. The bond cannot be dissolved without killing us both. That is the truth, and I would never consider it, no matter what anyone said. His hands cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. Do you hear me, Elara? I am bound to you, forever. Until the stars die and the universe ends, nothing will change that. Elara wanted to believe him, but the chaos in her mind made it so hard to hold on to anything, even his certainty. Kael felt her doubt through the bond, and pain flashed across his face. I am going to find out what is happening to you, he said quietly, and I am going to fix it. I promise you. He held her until she finally fell into an exhausted, nightmare-plagued sleep. The next morning, Kael convened an emergency meeting in his private study. Present were his most trusted advisors, the High Arbiter who had performed the binding, Miraith, his head guardian, and the palace's chief physician, a being whose species had mastered healing arts across thousands of worlds. Elara is being poisoned, Kael said without preamble. I am certain of it. The physician stepped forward. Your radiance. We have examined her multiple times. We found no toxins, no pathogens, no... Then look again, Kael said coldly. But this time look for things that specifically affect the mind. Hallucinogens, psychological agents, substances that would cause paranoia and nightmares. Look for poisons that build up slowly over time that are designed to be subtle. The physician bowed. I will conduct a comprehensive scan immediately. Good. Kyle turned to his guardian. What have you learned about Lyssa Voss? The guardian's expression was grim. She has been meeting regularly with a black market information dealer, one who specializes in prohibited substances and covert operations. We apprehended him this morning. Under questioning, he confessed to providing her with Shadow Bloom essence. The room went silent. Even Kyle, who had suspected, felt shock ripple through him. Mireth spoke, their voice hollow with horror. Shadow Bloom essence is banned throughout the Empire. It causes cumulative psychological damage, paranoia, hallucinations, and eventual mental collapse. In humans, with their more fragile neural structures, the effects would be even more pronounced. How long has she been administering it? Kyle's voice was very quiet, very controlled. The dealer estimates 3 weeks, Your Radiance. Based on the quantity she purchased, she has been giving Elara small doses daily. 3 weeks. The same length of time that Elara had been deteriorating. The rage that had been simmering in Kael since he first suspected Lyssa now erupted. The temperature in the room dropped as frost began to form on the windows. The light fixtures flickered. Every Vael'Thar in the room took a step back, recognizing the signs of an emperor losing control. Find her, Kyle said, his voice resonating with harmonics that made the walls vibrate. Find her now, and bring her to me. The Guardian left immediately, but they returned minutes later, their face troubled. Your Radiance, Lyssa Voss is not in her quarters. She was last seen entering the council chambers an hour ago. Kyle's eyes widened. The council chambers, where Elara was supposed to be meeting with representatives this morning, where Elara was supposed to be alone, vulnerable, still poisoned. He was moving before conscious thought, his body shifting into the accelerated state that Vael'Thar could achieve in emergencies, the world slowing around him as he ran. In the council chambers, Elara sat at the long table, trying desperately to focus on the documents in front of her. The council meeting was scheduled to begin in minutes, and she needed to be prepared, needed to appear competent and stable. But her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the pages. The words swam in front of her eyes, meaningless symbols that refused to form coherent thoughts. The door opened and Lyssa entered, her face sympathetic. Still trying to work? Elara, you need to rest. I can't, Elara said, her voice breaking. I have to do this. I have to prove I'm not falling apart, Lyssa finished gently. She came and sat beside Elara, taking the documents from her trembling hands. Sweetheart, you are falling apart, and it's not your fault. You were chosen for something you weren't ready for, something no human could be ready for. Kyle said the bond was forever, Elara whispered. Kyle doesn't want to lose you, but sometimes we have to let go of what we love to save it. Lyssa pulled something from her robes, a small crystalline device that glowed with soft blue light. This is a dissolution catalyst. It's a failsafe built into all soul bindings in case something goes catastrophically wrong. If you activate it, it will sever the bond instantly. You'll be free. The pain will stop. The nightmares will end. Elara stared at the device, her exhausted mind struggling to process what she was hearing. But Kyle said dissolution would kill us both. He was wrong, Lyssa said smoothly. Or perhaps he lied to keep you bound to him. The catalyst allows for clean separation with minimal damage. You'll both survive. You'll both be free. She pressed the device into Elara's hands. It was warm, pulsing gently. All you have to do is press the center and speak the word of dissolution, severance. That's all. And this nightmare ends. Elara's fingers closed around the device. The thought of the nightmare's ending, of the confusion and fear and chaos finally stopping, was almost irresistible. Through the bond, she felt a distant surge of panic from Kyle. He was afraid, desperately afraid. But maybe he was afraid because he knew this was coming, because he knew she was going to choose freedom. Do it, Elara, Lyssa urged softly. Set yourself free, set him free. End this before it destroys you both. Elara raised the device, her thumb hovering over the center, and then the doors exploded inward. Kyle stood in the doorway, his chest heaving, his eyes blazing with golden fire. Elara, do not touch that device. Elara froze, her mind too shattered to understand what was happening. Lyssa stood smoothly, her expression shifting from sisterly concern to something cold and calculating. Your radiance. How unfortunate. Step away from her, Kael said, his voice deadly quiet. Or what? Lyssa's smile was sharp. She's holding the dissolution catalyst. One word from her and the bond breaks. Even you can't move fast enough to stop that. That is not a dissolution catalyst, Kael said, moving slowly into the room. It is a neural disruptor. If she activates it, it will destroy her mind completely and kill me through the bond's backlash. You were never planning to free her. You were planning to destroy us both. Elara's blood ran cold. She looked down at the device in her hands, seeing it suddenly for what it was. A weapon, a trap. You poisoned me, Elara whispered, her voice hollow. The tea, it was you. All of it was you. Lyssa's mask finally dropped completely. Her face twisted into something ugly and hateful. You think you deserve this? You think you earned it? I am the one who fought for everything I have. I am the one who sacrificed and struggled and clawed my way up from nothing. And you, simple, stupid Elara, you get handed an empire because some ancient rock decided you were special. You are my sister, Elara said, tears streaming down her face. You are nothing, Lyssa spat. You have always been nothing. And when you activate that device and destroy yourself, I will be here to comfort the grieving emperor. I will be the one to help him through his loss. And eventually, when enough time has passed, I will be the one at his side, because I deserve it, because I am worthy of power in ways you never were. Elara's hands were shaking so hard she nearly dropped the device. Every instinct screamed at her to throw it away, but her poisoned mind could not coordinate the movement. Kael took another step forward. Elara, listen to my voice. You are stronger than the poison, stronger than her lies. I know you are afraid and confused and hurting, but deep down, beneath all of it, you know the truth. You know who you are. You know what we have is real. Don't listen to him, Lyssa said sharply. He's trying to manipulate you. Activate the device, Elara. End this. Elara looked between them, her sister who had betrayed her in the cruelest way possible, and Kael, whose love she felt through the bond even now, burning bright and unwavering despite everything. And in that moment, something crystallized in her shattered mind, a core of certainty that the poison had not been able to touch. Kael had given her a choice during the binding ceremony, the freedom to accept or refuse. Lyssa had spent weeks systematically destroying that freedom, manipulating and poisoning and lying, until Elara could not trust her own thoughts. One had offered her power and truth, the other had offered her slavery disguised as freedom. Elara looked at the device in her hands. Then she looked at Lyssa. No, she said quietly, and she threw the device across the room, where it shattered against the wall. Lyssa's face contorted with rage. She lunged forward, but Kael was already there, moving faster than Elara's human eyes could track. He caught Lyssa by the arm, his grip unyielding. You are under arrest for attempted murder of the Emperor's bonded mate, he said coldly. You will be tried, convicted, and exiled to the farthest prison moon in the Empire. You will never see another living being for as long as you exist. You can't do this to me, Lyssa screamed. I'm her sister, I'm human, you can't— I can, Kael said quietly, and I will. Guards. Imperial guardians flooded into the room, seizing Lyssa and dragging her away. Her screams echoed down the hallway long after she disappeared from sight. Then Kael was at Elara's side, pulling her into his arms. Through the bond she felt his relief, his rage, his love, all tangled together in a knot of overwhelming emotion. I'm sorry, Elara sobbed against his chest. I almost— You did not, Kael said firmly. You chose correctly when it mattered most, that is all that counts. She poisoned me for weeks. She made me think I was going insane. I know, and we will fix it. The physician is already preparing the treatment. The poison will be purged from your system. The nightmares will end. You will heal. Elara clung to him, feeling the steadiness of his presence anchoring her to reality. I thought she loved me. I know, Kael murmured, and his pain for her was as deep as her own. I know. They stood there together, in the ruined council chamber, holding on to each other as the enormity of the betrayal washed over them. Elara had learned a terrible truth. Family was not always love, and blood did not always mean loyalty. But she had also learned something else. She was not alone anymore, and that made all the difference. The medical wing of the Grand Celestium was a place of quiet efficiency, where technology and ancient healing arts merged into something that felt more like magic than science. Elara lay in a chamber filled with soft golden light, submerged in a suspension field that held her body weightless while specialized nanites worked through her system, identifying and neutralizing the shadow bloom toxin that had ravaged her mind for weeks. Kael had not left her side since they brought her here 3 days ago. He sat in a chair beside the suspension field, one hand resting on the transparent barrier, maintaining their connection through the bond. Through him, she could feel stability, an anchor point that kept her from drifting into the nightmares that still tried to pull her under. The chief physician, a being named Vael'Thar, whose species possessed natural empathic healing abilities, monitored the readings with careful attention. Their 4 eyes tracked multiple data streams simultaneously, their crystalline fingers adjusting instruments with practiced precision. "The toxin is being successfully purged," Vael'Thar said in their melodious voice. "However, the psychological damage will take longer to heal. Shadow bloom essence creates neural pathways that reinforce fear and paranoia. These pathways must be carefully dissolved and rebuilt. The process cannot be rushed without risking permanent damage." "How long?" Kael asked, his voice rough from lack of sleep. "Another week for full physical purification, several months, perhaps longer, for complete psychological recovery." Vael'Thar's expression softened with sympathy. "But she will recover your radiance. The bond between you provides a foundation of emotional stability that will significantly accelerate her healing. She is fortunate to have you." "I am the fortunate one," Kael said quietly, his eyes never leaving Elara's face. Through the bond, Elara felt his words as truth, not politeness. The depth of his love for her, his relief that she was still alive, his rage at what had been done to her, all of it flowed through their connection like a river of warmth. She tried to speak, but her voice came out as a whisper. "Kael!" He was immediately on his feet, pressing close to the barrier. "I am here. You are safe. Lyssa," the name hurt to say. "She is gone, exiled. She will never hurt you again." His voice was gentle but firm. "You do not need to think about her now. Focus on healing." But Elara needed to know. "What happens to her?" Kael was silent for a long moment. "She was sentenced to life imprisonment on Thalis 9, a moon at the edge of the Empire designed for those who have committed crimes against the imperial family. She will have a small habitat, supplies, everything needed for survival. But she will be alone, completely and utterly alone. It is considered one of the cruelest punishments in the Empire. Isolation without end." Elara should have felt satisfaction, justice, but instead she felt only a deep, aching sadness. "She was my sister." "She was," Kael acknowledged, "but she chose hatred over love, ambition over family. She made her choices, Elara. You are not responsible for them. I should have seen it, should have known. You trusted her because you are capable of love and loyalty. That is not a weakness. That is your strength." Kael's hand pressed harder against the barrier, as if trying to physically reach her. "What she did says everything about who she is, and nothing about who you are." Tears slipped down Elara's face, absorbed immediately by the suspension field. "I feel broken." "You are wounded," Kael corrected. "Wounded is not the same as broken. Wounds heal, and I will be here, every moment, helping you heal." Over the following days, as the toxins slowly cleared from her system, Elara began to feel the fog lifting from her mind. The nightmares lessened, became less vivid, less consuming. Her thoughts became clearer, more coherent. She could hold conversations without losing track of what she was saying. She could distinguish between real memories and the paranoid delusions the poison had created. But the emotional wounds were deeper. Every time she thought about Lyssa, about the sister who had helped raise her, who had shared that freezing apartment with her in their childhood, who had betrayed her with such calculated cruelty, the pain was almost physical. Miraith visited often, sitting beside her and speaking in their soft, melodious voice about healing, about trauma, about how the mind processed betrayal. "Your sister exploited the trust that comes from shared blood," Miraith explained one afternoon. "This is one of the deepest violations possible. It is natural to grieve, not just for what she did, but for what you believed you had and now know was false." "How do I trust anyone again?" Elara asked. "If I couldn't see the truth about my own sister, how can I trust my judgment about anyone?" "You saw it," Miraith reminded her gently. "During the binding ceremony, you felt something was wrong. Your instincts were correct. The poison confused your mind, but your deeper self knew. Trust that self, it did not fail you." Elara wanted to believe that, but doubt was easier than trust, especially now. On the 7th day, Vael'Thar declared the physical purification complete. The toxin was gone, and Elara was moved from the suspension field to a regular bed in a private recovery room overlooking the palace gardens. Kael remained with her, refusing all attempts by his advisors to pull him away for imperial duties. "The Empire can wait," he told them flatly. "My bonded mate cannot." That night, as they lay together in the recovery room bed, Kael holding her gently against his chest, Elara finally asked the question that had been haunting her. "Why did the Soulstone choose me?" Kael was quiet for a moment, his hand stroking her hair. "What do you mean? I'm nobody. Just a human translator who learned an impossible language because I was too stubborn to give up. I have no power, no status, no special gifts. Why would an ancient artifact choose me to bond with an emperor?" "You want to know the truth?" Kael asked softly. "Please." He took a breath. "The Soulstone does not choose based on power or status. It chooses based on resonance, on the pattern of a soul that complements its bearer. For 3,000 years it was dormant because no one in the Empire carried a pattern that resonated with mine." His voice dropped to a whisper. "I had begun to believe I would be alone forever. That immortality meant eternal isolation." He shifted so he could look at her face. "And then, across 3 star systems, I felt it. A resonance so pure and strong it woke me from sleep. It pulled me across the Empire to a tiny outpost where a human woman worked in a translation booth, speaking my language with imperfect pronunciation, but perfect understanding." "But why me?" Elara insisted. "Because your soul carries something I have lost over millennia. Compassion without calculation, kindness without expectation of reward, the ability to love deeply despite being hurt repeatedly." His golden eyes held hers. "You learned an impossible language for 6 years alone, just to escape poverty and help your father. You sent him money even when you could barely afford to eat. You trusted your sister, despite every instinct warning you otherwise, because you believed in the possibility of familial love. You are capable of extraordinary loyalty, Elara, and loyalty is the rarest treasure in an empire built on ambition and power." "Lyssa was ambitious and powerful," Elara said bitterly. "Maybe the Soulstone chose wrong. The Soulstone chose the one who would refuse to activate a neural disruptor, even when her mind was shattered by poison," Kael said firmly. "It chose the one who would throw away what she believed was freedom, rather than destroy the person she loved. It chose the one who is strong enough to survive betrayal and still believe in the possibility of genuine connection." He cupped her face in his hands. "It chose correctly, Elara, and I am grateful beyond words that it did." The tears came again, but they were different this time. Not tears of pain and confusion, but of release, of acceptance. "I love you," she whispered. "I know," he murmured. "I feel it through the bond, and I love you. More than I thought myself still capable of loving." They held each other in the quiet darkness, the bond between them pulsing with warmth and certainty, stronger now than it had been even during the ceremony. Because it had been tested, because it had survived. 2 months passed. Elara continued her recovery, working with Miraith and other counselors to process the trauma, to rebuild her confidence, to learn to trust her own judgment again. Kael resumed some of his imperial duties, but structured his schedule around being present for Elara whenever she needed him. The council members who had been whispering about her incompetence, influenced by Lyssa's carefully planted rumors, now approached with apologies and renewed respect. They had witnessed her strength during the crisis, the way she had refused to break even when everything was falling apart. She had earned their regard not through the Soulstone, but through her own choices. Slowly, carefully, Elara began to step into her role as the Emperor's bonded mate. She attended council meetings, not as a decoration but as a participant, offering perspectives that came from her human experience, her understanding of what it meant to struggle and survive at the bottom of the Empire's hierarchy. Her insights were different from the centuries-old wisdom of the Vael'Thar nobility, and because they were different, they were valuable. She began working on reforms to improve conditions for humans and other low-status species within the Empire. Better labor protections, educational opportunities, pathways to advancement that did not require centuries of accumulated wealth. The work was slow and met resistance from those who benefited from the existing hierarchy, but she persisted, and Kael supported her, using his authority to push through changes that would have been impossible for her to achieve alone. Gradually, Elara realized something surprising. She was good at this. Not perfect, not without mistakes, but genuinely effective at navigating the complex political landscape of the Empire. The same skills that had let her master the high tongue, stubbornness, attention to detail, willingness to learn from failure, served her well in her new role. One evening, 3 months after Lyssa's exile, Elara stood on the balcony of their chambers, looking out at the city lights of Vael'Thar Prime. Kael came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That I'm not who I was," she said slowly. "The poison, the betrayal, everything that happened, it changed me." "Are you sorry for the change?" Elara considered. "No, I'm not. I'm sadder now, more cautious, but also stronger, more certain of who I am and what I'm capable of." She turned in his arms to face him. "Lyssa tried to destroy me because she thought I was weak, and maybe I was weak in some ways, but I'm not anymore." "You were never weak," Kael said. "Kindness is not weakness. Trust is not weakness. You were always strong, Elara. You just did not know it yet." "Maybe," she allowed, "but now I do know it, and that changes everything." She leaned up and kissed him, feeling the bond flare between them, warm and bright and unbreakable. Far away, on a desolate moon at the edge of the Empire, Lyssa Voss sat in her solitary habitat and stared at the stars. She had everything she needed for physical survival: food, water, shelter, even entertainment systems. But she was utterly, completely alone. No one to talk to, no one to manipulate, no one to hear her voice. In the silence, she finally understood what she had lost. Not an empire, not power, but the only person who had ever genuinely loved her, despite her flaws. She had destroyed her sister to reach for a crown that was never meant for her, and now she would spend eternity contemplating that choice, alone in the dark. Back in the Grand Celestium, Elara smiled against Kael's lips, feeling his love through the bond, feeling her own strength burning bright within her. She had survived, she had healed, and she had learned that true power came not from status or ambition, but from choosing love over hatred, connection over isolation, courage over fear. The Soulstone had chosen correctly after all, and Elara was finally beginning to understand why. 2 years had passed since the soul-binding ceremony, 2 years since Lyssa's betrayal and exile, 2 years of healing, growth and transformation that had reshaped not just Elara's life, but the very fabric of the Vael'Thar Empire. Elara stood in the Grand Assembly Hall, addressing representatives from 300 worlds. She wore robes of silver and white that complemented Kael's midnight blue, the circlet on her head, now embedded with a fully restored soulstone that pulsed with gentle light. Her voice, once timid and uncertain, now carried the confidence of someone who had faced darkness and emerged stronger. "The Labor Protection Act is not an attack on prosperity," she said, her words translated simultaneously into dozens of languages by the same technology that had once been her livelihood. "It is an investment in the Empire's greatest resource, its people. When we lift up those at the bottom, we strengthen the foundation that supports us all." There was murmuring in the assembly, some supportive, some resistant, but all respectful. Elara had earned that respect through 2 years of tireless work, of proving that her insights and reforms created tangible, positive change. A Thyrosian merchant lord raised one of his 4 hands. "Honored consort, you speak of investing in the lower classes, but what incentive do they have to improve their station if we simply give them comfort?" Elara smiled slightly. She had expected this question, had heard variations of it dozens of times. "I grew up in what you would call the lower classes. I shared a single room with my sister and father in a building where the heating failed every winter. We were not comfortable. We were surviving." She paused, letting her words sink in. "And yet I spent 6 years teaching myself the high tongue, not because I was comfortable, but because I believed that effort and dedication could create a better future. The reforms I propose do not eliminate struggle. They eliminate the barriers that make effort meaningless. They ensure that when someone works hard, they actually have a chance to rise." The Thyrosian considered, then slowly lowered his hand, apparently satisfied. Kael, who sat beside her on a slightly elevated throne, touched her hand briefly, a gesture of support that sent warmth through the bond. Through their connection, she felt his pride, his admiration, his love. The vote was called. The Labor Protection Act passed with a significant majority. As the assembly adjourned, Merith approached, their large, dark eyes bright with approval. "You have become a formidable political force, honored consort." There were members of this assembly who swore they would never support human-led reforms. "You have changed minds that have been closed for centuries." "I had a good teacher," Elara said, smiling at the small blue being who had guided her through so much. "I taught you protocol and history," Merith said, but the compassion, the conviction, the strength to persist despite opposition, that was always yours. Later that evening, Elara and Kael walked through the palace gardens hand in hand. The gardens had become Elara's favorite place, a sanctuary where the impossible beauty of alien nature reminded her that wonder still existed in the universe. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, the bond humming contentedly between them. Then Kael spoke. "I received a message from Thalis 9 today." Elara stiffened. "Lyssa. She is struggling. The isolation is taking a severe psychological toll. The warden believes that without some form of human contact, she may not survive another year with her sanity intact." Elara's first instinct was to feel satisfaction, justice. The woman who had poisoned her mind and tried to destroy her was now suffering the consequences of her choices. But beneath that instinct was something else, something that surprised her. "Pity. What are you asking me?" she said quietly. "Nothing," Kael said immediately. "This is not a decision you need to make." Lyssa's sentence was just and appropriate. She attempted to murder us both. No one would fault you for letting the sentence stand. "But," Kael stopped walking and turned to face her, "but you are not the kind of person who finds satisfaction in another's suffering, even when that person hurt you deeply. And I know that if Lyssa's deterioration leads to her death, you will carry that guilt, even though you should not." Elara looked up at the stars, so many of them visible in Vael'Thar Prime's clear night sky. "She destroyed me, or tried to. She poisoned me, manipulated me, tried to trick me into killing us both. She did it because she was jealous, because she wanted what I had." "Yes," Kael agreed. "And now you're suggesting I show her mercy." "I am suggesting nothing. I am simply telling you that you have the power to alter her sentence if you choose. You could allow her limited communication privileges, or occasional visits from counselors, small mercies that would not erase her punishment, but might preserve her sanity." He paused. "Or you could do nothing, and no one would question that choice." Elara was silent for a long time. Through the bond, Kael felt her internal struggle, the war between her justified anger and her fundamental nature. Finally she spoke. "She's still my sister. Despite everything, we shared a childhood. We loved the same father. We survived the same poverty." Elara's voice was tight. "What she did was unforgivable, but letting her go insane in isolation, that doesn't heal me. It doesn't undo what happened. It just adds more pain to the universe. What do you want to do?" "I want to allow her limited communication privileges. Once a month she can speak with a counselor via holotransmission, someone who can help her process what she did and why." Elara looked at Kael. "Not because she deserves mercy, but because I refuse to become someone who takes satisfaction in suffering, even the suffering of my enemies. That's not who I am, and I won't let her betrayal change that." Kael pulled her into his arms. "This is why the Soulstone chose you," he murmured against her hair. "This strength, this refusal to let cruelty make you cruel." "Is it strength?" Elara asked. "Or is it weakness?" "It is the strongest thing I have ever witnessed," Kael said firmly. "Anyone can respond to hatred with hatred. It takes extraordinary courage to respond with compassion." The next day, Elara transmitted her decision to Thalis 9. Lyssa would be allowed monthly counseling sessions. Nothing more. The isolation would continue, the punishment would remain, but a small light would be allowed into the darkness. When the first session was arranged, the counselor reported back that Lyssa had wept for 3 hours straight, unable to form coherent words. Whether from relief, guilt, or the psychological damage of 2 years of isolation, no one could say. Elara tried not to think about it, tried to focus on her work, on the Empire, on the reforms that were slowly but steadily improving lives across hundreds of worlds. 6 months later, the counselor requested a meeting with Elara. She was a Vael'Thar psychologist named Serath, ancient and wise, specializing in cases of profound trauma and moral failing. "Your sister wishes to speak with you," Serath said carefully. "She has spent these months in intensive therapy, confronting what she did and why. She has written you a letter, but she asked me to deliver it only if you consented to receive it." Elara's first instinct was refusal. She had moved on. She was happy. The last thing she needed was to reopen old wounds. But Kael's hand found hers, and through the bond, she felt his steady support. "Whatever you choose, I am with you." "I'll read it," Elara said finally. Serath handed her a data tablet. The letter was long, written in Lyssa's precise handwriting, translated into both English and the High Tongue. "Elara, I do not expect forgiveness. I do not deserve it. What I did to you was monstrous. Driven by jealousy and ambition so toxic, it destroyed the one genuine relationship I had ever known. For 2 years I have been alone with my thoughts. At first I was angry. I blamed you, blamed the Soulstone, blamed the universe for giving you what should have been mine. But isolation has a way of stripping away delusions. There is no one here to perform for, no one to manipulate, no one to lie to except myself, and eventually even those lies fell apart. I see now what I could not see then. You never took anything from me. You were chosen by forces beyond anyone's control, and you accepted that choice with courage I never possessed. I was not overlooked. I was simply not suited for what you were given. The Soulstone recognizes patterns of the soul, and my soul is not made for genuine connection. It is made for ambition, for manipulation, for taking rather than giving. I poisoned you because I wanted to destroy what I could not have. I tried to kill you and Kael because, if I could not be at his side, I would ensure no one could. That is who I am at my core, someone who would burn the world rather than see someone else succeed where I failed. The counselor tells me that recognizing this is the first step toward change. I do not know if I can change. I do not know if my nature allows for redemption. But in these sessions, in these small moments of human contact you granted me, I have begun to understand something I never grasped before. Strength does not come from taking. It comes from giving, from choosing compassion when you have every reason to choose cruelty. You showed me that strength when you altered my sentence. You could have left me to deteriorate into madness. No one would have blamed you. I certainly would not have blamed you. But you chose mercy, not because I deserved it, but because that is who you are. I will never leave this moon. I will never see another sunrise or feel another person's touch. I will die here alone paying for what I did. That is just. That is appropriate. But because of your mercy, I will die with my mind intact, with the understanding of my own failures, with the knowledge that genuine strength looks like my sister standing before an empire and choosing compassion over vengeance. Thank you for the gift of clarity. Thank you for being everything I could not be. And thank you for surviving what I tried to do to you. I am sorry. The words are meaningless given what I did, but they are all I have. Lyssa Elara read the letter twice, tears streaming down her face. When she finished, she handed the tablet to Kael, who read it silently, his expression unreadable. What do you think? She asked finally. I think she means it, Kael said. I think isolation and therapy have genuinely changed her perspective, but that does not erase what she did. It does not require you to forgive her or to offer her anything more than what you have already given. I know, Elara said. She was quiet for a long moment, then added, but I want to send a response, not for her sake, for mine. She composed her reply carefully, weighing every word. Lyssa, I cannot forgive you. Not yet. Perhaps not ever. What you did caused damage that I am still healing from, damage that will leave scars for the rest of my life. You took my trust and weaponized it. You took my love and poisoned it. Those wounds do not close simply because you have had time to reflect. But I acknowledge your apology. I see that you are trying to understand what you did and why. That is more than I expected and more than you owed me. I will not pretend we can rebuild what we once had. The sister I thought I knew never existed. She was a fiction I believed because I needed to believe that family meant love. I know better now. Blood creates obligation, but it does not create connection. Connection must be chosen every day through actions that prove its worth. You made your choices. I made mine. We both have to live with the consequences. I hope the counseling helps. I hope you find some measure of peace in your remaining years. Not because you deserve it, but because I choose to hope for healing rather than suffering, even for those who have hurt me. That is my choice. It is what makes me different from who you were when you poisoned me. I will not write again. Consider this closure. Elara, she sent the message, and then closed that chapter of her life with finality. 5 years passed. 5 years of work, of growth, of deepening the bond with Kael, until it felt less like two separate beings connected, and more like one consciousness experiencing reality from two perspectives. 5 years of reforms that slowly transformed the empire into something more just, more compassionate, more aligned with Elara's vision of what power should be used for. The empire began calling her the Empress of Compassion. Not officially, there was no formal title change, but in the streets, in the outer worlds, among the species who had benefited from her reforms, the name spread like wildfire. Humans, once considered little more than useful laborers, now had pathways to genuine advancement within the imperial structure. Educational programs, mentorship initiatives, legal protections, all bore Elara's mark. And it was not just humans. Dozens of low-status species found their circumstances improving because one human woman had refused to forget where she came from. On the 5th anniversary of the soul binding, the High Council officially recognized Elara's contributions with a new title, Imperial Advocate, a position that gave her formal authority to propose and champion reforms throughout the Empire. During the ceremony, as thousands watched from across the Empire, Kael spoke. 5 years ago, a soulstone that had been dormant for 3 millennia awakened and led me to an unremarkable outpost where an unremarkable human worked in a translation booth. I say unremarkable because that is how she appeared to the casual observer. Humble, ordinary, easy to overlook. But the soulstone saw what I could not yet see, that sometimes the greatest strength comes wrapped in the humblest package. That sometimes the most powerful force in the universe is not a fleet of warships or an army of soldiers, but one person who refuses to let cruelty make them cruel, who responds to betrayal not with vengeance, but with justice, who looks at suffering and chooses to alleviate it rather than ignore it. Elara Voss came to this empire with nothing, no status, no wealth, no power, and in 5 years she has changed the fundamental nature of how we treat the vulnerable among us, not through force, not through manipulation, but through persistent, unwavering compassion, backed by the courage to fight for what is right, even when that fight is difficult. The Soulstone chose correctly. It chose the soul that could remind an ancient empire what it means to be genuinely strong. Elara stood beside him, tears streaming down her face, feeling the love and pride flowing through the bond in waves. She thought back to that frightened translator in the booth, watching aliens glide across polished floors, believing she was invisible, and always would be. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, wiser, more certain of her own worth. Someone who had survived betrayal and poison, and the cruelty of the person who should have loved her most. Someone who had chosen, again and again, to respond to darkness with light. The ceremony ended with celebration, and as Elara and Kael walked hand in hand back to their chambers, she felt a completeness she had never imagined possible. "Are you happy?" Kael asked softly. Elara looked up at him, at the being who had given her a choice when he could have simply claimed her, who had protected her when she was vulnerable, who had believed in her strength even when she could not believe in it herself. "Yes," she said simply, "I am happy." And it was true. Despite everything, despite the scars and the pain and the sister she had lost, Elara had found something she had never dared to hope for, a place where she belonged, a purpose that mattered, a love that was real and unshakable. The Soulstone had not chosen her because she was perfect. It had chosen her because she was human, flawed and frightened and capable of extraordinary courage when it mattered most. And that, Elara finally understood, was enough. That night, as they lay together, watching the stars through the transparent ceiling of their chamber, Kael spoke. "There is something I never told you about the Soulstone." Elara turned to look at him. "What?" "When it awakens, it shows the bearer a vision, a glimpse of what the bond could become if both souls are willing to grow together." His golden eyes found hers. "When it awakened for you, I saw this moment. 5 years in the future, watching you stand before the Empire as its advocate, strong and certain and radiant with purpose, I saw the life we could build together, if you chose to accept the bond. And if I had refused? Then the vision would have remained only a possibility, and I would have returned to my solitary existence." He pulled her closer. "But you did not refuse. You chose courage over fear, and you made the vision real." Elara smiled against his chest. "So did you. We made it real together." "Yes," he agreed. "Together." They fell asleep in each other's arms, the bond between them humming with contentment. Two souls that had found each other across the vast darkness of space and chosen to become something greater than either could be alone. Far away on a desolate moon at the edge of the Empire, Lyssa Voss sat in her solitary habitat and looked at the stars. She had received Elara's final message 5 years ago and had not attempted to contact her again. The counseling sessions continued, a monthly mercy that kept her sane but did nothing to ease the loneliness. But she no longer spent her days consumed by rage and jealousy. Instead, she spent them thinking about the sister she had destroyed, about the choices that had led her to this isolation, about what she might have become if she had chosen differently. She would never leave this moon. She would never hold power or influence again. She would die here alone, the architect of her own destruction. But in her final years, she had learned something valuable, that true power was not taking what you wanted, regardless of the cost. True power was being strong enough to give when you had every reason to take, strong enough to show mercy when vengeance was justified, strong enough to choose compassion over cruelty. Her sister had possessed that power all along, and Lyssa, in her arrogance and jealousy, had been too blind to see it until it was far too late. In the Grand Celestium, Elara woke to sunlight streaming through the crystalline walls and Kael's arms around her. Through the bond, she felt his love, his contentment, his absolute certainty that they belonged together. She had been chosen by a Soulstone. She had been betrayed by her sister. She had survived poison and manipulation and the cruelty of someone who should have loved her. And through it all, she had remained true to herself. She had refused to let suffering make her cruel, refused to let power corrupt her compassion, refused to let an empire change the fundamental kindness that defined who she was. The Soulstone had chosen correctly, and Elara at last had chosen herself. The story of the human translator, who became an empress not through birthright or ambition, but through persistent, unwavering compassion, would be told across the empire for generations to come. But for Elara, the most important part of the story was not the title or the power or the reforms. It was the moment, repeated every morning when she woke in Kael's arms and knew with absolute certainty that she was loved, that she was seen, that she was exactly where she belonged. And that was more than enough. It was everything.